Welcome back to the second episode of An Old Man Watches, and as you will have seen from the title of the video, today we are talking about 1954's The Snow Creature. Half man, half monster! That's not actually part of the title, but it is the banner line on this very yellow poster. Obviously, very old film, and full colour posters were perhaps not quite so available, and therefore we see this kind of sort of single colour poster being done a fair bit back in those days. So I'm going to get stuck in with a brief summary of the movie, and its basic outline of plot, which is that a scientific expedition to the Himalayas stumbles across a Yeti, and they bring it back to, they capture it, bring it back to the United States to study, and it goes poorly. And if that basic outline of a plot sounds familiar, it's because it's King Kong, but with the giant ape replaced with a human-sized Yeti thing, which is a guy in a suit, obviously. And also, kind of like with all of the talent and pacing and skillfulness that is in the original King Kong, just completely removed. This is again, it's not a good film. It's for a number of reasons. We're going to talk about some of those reasons today, and why the story doesn't work beyond the fact that this is a cheap film, with not especially great acting, and not especially great direction, and no budget for you can see the Yeti there. He's nowhere near that big in the film, I should point out. He's marginally taller than a human being. So what does the Snow Creature feature other than a cheap cashing in on the periodic Yeti fascination that our culture seems to have? And let's not forget, as an older person, let me tell anyone who is probably under 30 who is actually watching this video, in the late 70s and early 80s, there was still genuine, controversy in in popular culture about whether Yetis existed. You can find quote-unquote documentary films from the late 70s and 80s. In fact, I might one day review one, purporting to have actual footage of the Yeti and purporting to show evidence that, Sasquatch, Yetis, abominable snowmen actually existed or exist. This is a thing that has recurred and has continued on for quite a long time, into the 80s. It's crazy, but there you go. The 80s really were a different time. So what does this feature film, why doesn't it work? What's wrong with the story beyond, the obvious surface level things? Well, let's start with the fact that this is a film built on a faulty foundation to start with. Okay, so the way that this scientific expedition to the Himalayas ends up encountering a Yeti is that the Yeti abducts the wife of one of the Sherpa guides, and the Sherpas seize control of the scientific expedition and insist on searching for the Yeti. Which is that what happens. They track the Yeti's footprints. Initially, the scientists from the West are all like, "There's no such thing as a Yeti," but eventually they find the footprints and maybe there is a Yeti. And then, despite the fact that they're actively tracking this thing, by accident they find its lair. So we're not exactly off to a great start here with the lead characters, but by accident they find its lair. And what we discover in its lair is it has a whole family. So it has a mate and it has children. And in the process of capturing the Yeti, the main male Yeti, they accidentally kind of wipe out the entire family. Now, the problem here is, at no point does anybody discuss, consider, ask, in the movie, in its narrative, why did the Yeti kidnap this woman? Because the whole movie stems from this act. The Yeti kidnaps a Sherpa woman, and the Sherpas, who I should mention are actually all Japanese actors speaking Japanese, insist on searching for it, and that's how it is discovered. Its family's wiped out. So why does it take this woman? It's had plenty of time to eat her if it was for food. It has a mate, and it wouldn't find a human woman attractive, you would think, because societies have their own concepts, and creatures have their own concepts of sexual attraction. Why did it take her? Why is this movie even happening? There's no reason. The movie starts from a faulty foundation. It just hopes that you won't think about why is this happening. There were plenty of other reasons, other ways that you could have kind of built this concept of they discover that a Yeti exists and they track it down. Like, there are plenty of other, but it abducts women. Well, immediately that makes it antagonistic. It's also what happens in King Kong. I think both of those factors probably play a part in why they decided to do this. But the movie's failure to kind of address it, and even give some kind of reason that the Yeti does this. It's got better sources of food. It's got a mate. It doesn't need this woman. It seems to just, have taken her back to its lair to have a decoration. It makes very little sense that it happens. It's not addressed in the movie. And I think, number one, it creates a kind of antagonism to the Yeti in the audience. It's a little bit titillating. And King Kong did it. Are the three reasons that does it. But it's a faulty foundation for the movie, because all of the action that comes after it, you're kind of like, if you stop and think about it, you're like, but why is any of this happening? What was the Yeti's plan? Why did it do this thing? It's never done it before, as far as we know. Well, certainly not in any recent time. What's going on? Nah, not going to talk about it. Doesn't matter. Forget about it. Just focus on the Yeti fighting action, and of which there will be almost none. But so there's a faulty foundation right at the heart of the movie. It fails to set up its premise in a convincing fashion. So the second thing that it features is fear of the other. And I use this term instead of racism to kind of narrow it down. It's still racism. It's still a racist movie. I refer you to the fact that all the Sherpas are Japanese people speaking Japanese. Like, there's no attempt to cast this in any way that isn't racist. The production is clearly a product of its time, from that lens. But it has it specifically exhibits a fear of the other, in a couple of ways. And one of the ways is quite an interesting way. When the scientists bring the Yeti back to the United States, the customs officials, confronted with this humanoid creature, the likes of which they've never seen before, say, wait a second, is this a person? It looks kind of like a person. Is it intelligent? If it's intelligent, you are guilty of illegal immigration. And the scientists, of course, are like, no, it's just a beast. It just looks vaguely human. It's like a gorilla, blah, 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 But the immigration officials insist that that the creature be held until an expert can come in and test it for intelligence. Now, this is interesting. Number one, because it's interesting just to see somebody say, "Hey, this creature is intelligent." But it's also interesting that their first reaction, and I guess they are immigration officials, but their first reaction to, or customs officials, their first reaction to this is not, if this creature is intelligent, you have kidnapped a thinking creature. Their first reaction is this an illegal immigrant? Are you bringing the other into our world? And it's interesting, so it's a very specific kind of racism that's probably most at play in this film, beyond the broader production issues. And I suspect that a big part, obviously, of why they cast Japanese American actors and Japanese actors is because they were much more accessible than Sherpa actors, and they figured that their audience wouldn't know the difference or really care, and they were probably at the time right. But yeah, so there's fear of the other in here. It's very much a movie where that fear of something different, and the fact that he's just half man, half monster, it's playing into a lot of really problematic tropes about half-caste humans and, you know, racial purity and that sort of thing with its advertising as well. So there's very much a fear of the other, a fear of the different that's running through this movie, and it's a specific instance of racism in it. And it's, you know, it's kind of terrible and awful, but it's there, and it creates an interesting situation in the movie, and the fact that, you know, I mean, you know, yes, the creature is intelligent. It's smart enough that it can escape, for instance. Brings me, you know, despite the fact that the Western scientists have said it's not intelligent, brings me to the third kind of key feature that I wanted to talk about in this movie. And generally speaking, I'm going to do 3 features a movie. You may have already worked that out if you watch both these videos. Idiot balls! Because boy, oh boy, find me a thing that, you know, the main characters in this movie are right about. You will eventually, but it's like right at the end of the movie. I mean, you know, the movie starts, the Sherpas say, Yeti. The scientists say, no, there's no such thing as a Yeti. There's a Yeti. You know, then they get to the US, and the scientists are like, no, it's not intelligent. It's intelligent. You know, it escapes. They're looking for it. It takes them forever to think, wow, a creature that lives in caves might be found in an environment that is the most similar to caves that it could find, i.e. the sewers, because, you know, every cheap science fiction movie needs to have a sewer section, just like, you know, every action computer game seems to need a sewer section. You know, the main cast, you sit here watching, these guys, they're thick. You know, they're wrong about everything through the whole movie. I'm like, why do I care about these people? You know, like what is, you know, why are these guys the protagonists? They're wrong about everything, you know. And these guys, and I'll tell you why these guys are the protagonists, because they're white and wealthy, and it's the 1950s. But yeah, I mean, it's a movie that fails because it doesn't have anybody at its heart with an ounce of sense, basically, who is right about anything. You know, I mean, eventually they work out, oh, it's in the sewers. They very nearly make a hash of actually tracking it down, and of course it gets killed. End of movie. You know, the day is saved. But why did the day even need saving? Well, the day needed saving because you brought this thing to the US. And why did you bring this thing to the US? Well, because it abducted a woman for no apparent reason. So you know, it's a movie with faulty foundations. It never addresses them, and it never gives us a protagonist to care about or engage with or respect in any way. And then it ends. And that's why, I mean, you know, it fails as a film, quite apart from its cheapness and all the rest of it. Because, you know, you can have movies that are cheaply made that work because at the end of the day, their script kind of hangs together. This one, it really doesn't. And that, at the end of the day, is why it doesn't work. So that's The Snow Creature from 1954. The next movie we were making, I thought it would be a good idea to move to something a little bit more modern to mix things up. So we're going to be talking about Age of the Dragons from 2011, a science fiction-y kind of retelling of Moby Dick is basically what that is. So I hope you'll check it out when it comes along. Okay, thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.